Everton versus Manchester United. For those I don't know about anyone else, but I always want to know the reason why this game is at 7 o'clock on a Sunday. So quick little Google. Shout out Pundit Arena, still doing well with the SEO, my former employers, because they were the first article there. So first article I clicked. And it's essentially BT picked the game as a 12:30 game. I don't know how they were allowed to do that, because this Europa League weekend was always going to be in, and United qualified automatically for the Europa League. However, the reason they gave was it's because there's no more 12:30 games. So you have to, from Europe, so you have to move it to Sunday at 7 now. That was always the case with Europa League. I think BT kind of found a way to pick a game and go hold their hands up and go, look, we want to move this game to 7 o'clock on a Sunday. So maybe it's not ideal timing for the fans, Sean, but that's the reasons that were given. The European, which made no sense to me, because, again, it was a Thursday night. United are playing this week. So the game can't, BT would have had to pick another game at 12:30. I think they found a loophole in that new Premier League rule brought in after essentially Jurgen Klopp and Des Kelly's interview there.
But it was also Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was the first manager when he...
Yeah.
I think it was actually United Everton where he said, you set us up to fail.
Yeah, I think and it's spot on, yeah.
And I do agree. The timing's obviously not great, but at least Manchester and Everton and Liverpool are in the northwest for the Manchester fans.
True, that's true.
What I would say about this game is that United need a response. I think United have been let off a lot from their performance against City, and I think if they're at the stage where it was a similar stage where Arsenal, where it's acceptance, where it's like, well, we know we're miles off it, so we can excuse a performance like this. And then, to be fair, it seemed like it was only Roy Keane and a little bit of Paul Scholes that I listened to that were hypercritical, and I think them too, certainly remember United and of their playing days in the golden era, because I thought United were really poor. Now they have a little bit of money in the bank from beating Liverpool, beating Arsenal, and winning 4 games in a row, but it's a huge game for them now against a really buoyant Everton side. 6 games unbeaten in the league. Frank Lampard 2 wins in a row, and everything seems to be rosy at Goodison Park, whereas United at the moment they're at that phase where they can't seem to get away from the cliff edge of good performance and bad performances, but you're still 1 game away from a catastrophic nightmare. And I think if they were to lose that game, I think they're plummeted back down the mountain
back
again.
Into it,
and they have to build up that reputation slowly. So it's a massive game, and it's obviously one of the last games of the weekend as well. So all eyes will be on it, and to be no getting away from it for United. It's a must win for them. Yeah. They won aspirations of Champions League football next year.
Yeah, it's a quirk in the fixture list, so there won't be a game until 3 o'clock this weekend, but by next weekend you'll have had a game on 8 o'clock on Friday and 12:30 on Saturday next weekend. So just shows you. I really do think this is a setup for like Frank Lampard defensive masterclass, where you might see a 0-0 or a 1-0 or 2-1 win for Everton here, because and you touched on it, Sean, that inconsistency in United's performance. I think it all goes back to ultimately their style of play, and right now, or for the last 3, 4, 5 years, by and large they've been a counter-attacking team. And the way Ten Hag has gone from, after the first 2 games, trying to introduce his principles, absolute shit show. So he ended up going back to a little bit more cautiously, a little bit more long balls. Fully backed up on the stats here. If you want to take a look, David De Gea, I think his long balls compared to short balls was night and day from the 3rd game to the 2nd game. And in fairness, Ten Hag's pragmatic approach has worked. It shows he's adaptable. It shows he's realised, given how big the club is, he's got to try and find a way to get a few results along the way. Not too dissimilar to Arteta, that FA Cup win. You could argue it, Arsenal fluked it a little bit, given the way they set up 5 at the back, but he ended up getting that bottom a lot of time. With Ten Hag, he needs to find a way of doing that. But looking at this game, I just really think Frank Lampard's going to set his team up with that back 5 and really park the bus and really frustrate Manchester United and give them 60-70% of the ball, but play with that bit of pace, that bit of spirit and fight. And Goodison Park will be rocking. They'll get right behind it. You've seen Everton fans on Twitter, on social media, on YouTube comments that they are really behind this manager and Frank Lampard, and all of that is to do with the culture he's building. We spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, Sean. Since then, I know they've only had 1 win since then, or only 1 game and 1 win since then, but it's just that spirit he's ignited into this football club. And you were the first person a few months ago, we were touching on it, I think it was an off-air chat, and you were saying to me, he's probably, if Frank Lampard could work in any Premier League club anymore after his debacle at Chelsea, which I thought I was probably his harshest critic at there, it's Everton. And I've opened my eyes, and since then all I see is a manager that's connecting with his club. The minute they had that pitch invasion for relegation, I don't think I've ever seen those scenes for a team staying up like that. I've seen pitch invasions and teams celebrate staying up, but there felt like there was more to come from this team. And the expectations from Everton fans during this summer compared to previous summers was, we're happy to stay up. We just want to see a team that's fighting. I might be reading that wrong, but all the previews I watched with Everton fans, they were just happy with Frank Lampard. They know how hard it's going to be. They're after selling Richarlison and Luca Dean the January previous. Let's just find a way to start playing a bit of football. And if we stay up, happy days, and we can build from there, where they've almost exceeded expectations. I know it's only a small sample size, but they have the best defence in the Premier League. And that's all down to Frank Lampard signings. Out and out Frank Lampard sign. This player plays well in the Premier League. Let's bring him in here, this centre-back. Let's build this partnership between Tarkowski and Cody. And we can complicate football a lot, but sometimes it's as simple as getting a solid back. And Tarkowski's been caught in possession a couple of times for Everton, but what's happened is, particularly remember Forest game, that Connor Cody bails him out or somebody bails him out. They've got Patterson. I know he's a bit injured out at the moment, but you've got Coleman there. Again, he's not been informed, but he's a good backup to have there all of a sudden. And then they signed Mopé. Similar thing with the centre-backs. A good, proven Premier League striker. When I say proven, not in terms of 20 goals a season. That's not what he's going to get you. But it's his running, it's in-behind running that Everton haven't had up front since Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who hopefully they can bring back at some point. So pretty exciting times for Everton. And I just can't see a way United get a win here because of the atmosphere at Goodison Park and the atmosphere Frank is building, but also the style of play and how the game's going to go. United are going to have to find a way to pick a team that can be good and with 60% possession and win this game. And maybe they can. So I'll be very interested about 6 o'clock on Sunday when we're watching the Arsenal-Liverpool game to have a look and see what team Ten Hag goes and whether he finds a way of getting more attacking players or more possession-based players on the pitch, perhaps in a less counter-attacking way. And I'm kind of thinking out loud here, is that a return to the team for Cristiano Ronaldo? Probably not, but maybe it's a game that suits his style of play.
Well, it's quite an interesting game because Everton at times they're not afraid to play out from the back. But if you watch Pickford a lot, he an awful lot of the time likes to go long with his kickouts. So if United play like that, I think it might suit Everton a little bit more. If I was Manchester United going there, I think I'd try Casemiro and McTominay and try and beef up that midfield slightly. Everton's midfield, the way they're playing with Iwobi and Onana and Idrissa Gana Gueye now, that kind of midfield three seems to be sort of found itself almost. They're all over the pitch. They're really leggy in terms of the running power that Iwobi and Onana have, and Idrissa Gana Gueye gets around the pitch, despite being in his 30s now. It's as I said, it's a big game. Everton are on a really good run, and Everton have gone away from the stage where if they lose to United now, United will have to have worked really hard to win there, and it would be a difficult win. And I think that's the biggest thing that Lampard's done, is made them harder to beat, but also got them away from the cliff edge in terms of if they lose to United, it's not the end of the world. And whereas when he took over under Benitez, it seemed like every week, I remember they lost to Brentford away under Benitez, and it was car crash stuff. I think it was on Sky. The away fans were going mad. The club was spiraling out of control. But Lampard has calmed them down. He's brought them back from that cliff edge. And that is almost what Ten Hag has did previous to the City game. He steadied the ship, got a couple of wins, took them under a bit more control. But now they're almost after that City game, they're creeping back towards there. And a bad result at Goodison for Ten Hag, it will push them further and further along. So it's going to be a really interesting game, interesting dynamic. Obviously, always a spicy enough game. A lot of players have played for both clubs. I remember a lot of people. Did Everton beat them 4-0 or something? Do you remember Billy Janovic? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The winger for Everton cut inside, hit one right-footed. And it's always a spicy enough game. I remember the game where there was a huge VAR incident with Sigurdsson was kind of in between De Gea and Maguire, and there always seems to be a bit of late drama at these kind of games. So it's a proper Premier League game in that respect, and I'm looking forward to it. And as I said, the biggest compliment I can give Lampard is if Everton lose, it's not the end of the world. But if Ten Hag loses, we're getting crisis talk again. So you have to give credit to Lampard for the job. It'd be interesting. Like, a lot of people have spoken that, do United's late goals give them a sign of something? I think we'll only find out in the next few weeks against, their late goals against City. Does he, Martial was bright when he came on. Does he start him? Rashford was poor. I have to say, if you watch Jadon Sancho's performance at the Etihad, it was absolutely disgraceful. And I really feel for him because he should be a shoo-in for the World Cup squad. Now you could argue him and maybe Saka buying out for one of those right wing spots, or that kind of other winger position with Sterling. He just looks a shadow of the player they bought. And there was times against Liverpool where he was bright at the start of the season, but against Man City, the amount of times he gave the ball away and was just so poor. And I really like Sancho. I think he's a brilliant player. I think he's kind of a breath of fresh air in that United team. But I'd be interested if Ten Hag keeps fighting him, or does he mix it up? Does he play Martial, Rashford? I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see a Anthony Martial and Rashford up there, because it gives them something different, a lot more pace on that side. Anthony looks bright, but I must say I was so disappointed with how Sancho played against City. And obviously it's a big game from going back to his former club, a club where he was at and Guardiola moved him on to Dortmund. But I just had to say it. I thought he was really poor.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you meant Everton there. I was like, what, Sancho played for Everton? And I was just like, what? And two things on that. Yeah, I think the late goal said more about Manchester City's defence. The amount of injuries they've had there is amazing. So they're definitely gettable at the back of the moment, City, I would say that. And the final player I wanted to bring up, Sean, we've spoken a bit about Granit Xhaka. If you are watching the YouTube video here, you can go back and watch our Arsenal versus Liverpool preview. But Granit Xhaka's been ridiculed for so long, but Jordan Pickford's been ridiculed for so long. Not by Everton fans, as me and you found out. So to give a bit of a background, myself and Sean, Arsenal fans, we went to Goodison Park with the Arsenal fans away from home, and the support Jordan Pickford got when we were singing England's number 2 to him at 1-0 up, and we were, to be honest, I felt great about myself. And the full time, Everton had just scored to make it 2-1, minutes ago, and the whole stadium erupts with England's number 1, England's number 1. I've been quoted on this podcast before saying I've never really heard an atmosphere like that. It was amazing. And going, well, yeah, they really like this guy and they watch him week in, week out. And he gets not ridiculed from England, but a lot of fans and a lot of people that don't watch him a lot do ridicule him. And he gets a lot of abuse for his height and the size of his hands and a lot of nasty stuff, I guess. I know a lot of it's banterful, but it's not great for him to hear. But his performances this season, and I watched a lot of Everton, and I could see sometimes last season and throughout his career, I do see a lot of people's he does tendencies to be rash, make a mistake, not too dissimilar to Aaron Ramsdale at times. But I definitely think this season he saves the way he's conducted himself, and you don't want to drag that personality out of him of being a showman as a goalkeeper, because you have to be confident to be a goalkeeper. It's just in the nature of the position. But I just think there's an air of confidence now, and he feels accepted at Everton. He's had a few seasons there to establish himself well and truly as the number 1 since moving from Sunderland. Big money move. He's the England number 1. He's been backed throughout by Southgate, and he had a wobble in the middle there, but I definitely feel he was definitely dropped for a few games, wasn't he? But I feel right now the way he's playing is probably the best of his career at Everton, at least, and maybe he can replicate that in an England shirt. I know he missed the couple of Nations League games, but it could be a big World Cup for him as well.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's no doubt Everton fans absolutely love him, adore him, and he's been a brilliant player for them. He's played a lot of Premier League football for again quite young-ish as a keeper. Obviously, he went through a tough time around the whole Virgil van Dijk injury and kind of the social media element. And he's a bit of a character, like you see him when he goes back to Sunderland, and has a bit of banter with the Newcastle fans whenever they play each other. But he is a brilliant player. That is a brilliant keeper. Is he a world class level of maybe say the top keepers around the world? He's probably a level or maybe so below that. But for Everton, he's absolutely outstanding. He won't go down as obviously their greatest ever keeper because of Neville Southall and the legacy he has there. But he's certainly one of the best keepers they've had in the Premier League era, and he's been a brilliant keeper for England. His record in saving penalties for England at the World Cup against Colombia, and also obviously against Italy, saving that one from Jorginho, stepped up when it mattered. And he's again, like I said, he probably gets beaten. He probably beats himself at times with his kind of reaction with the fans and stuff. And sometimes again with Ramsdale, that can go against you, and it's part of being a goalkeeper and cop and stick from the fans. But there's no doubt he'll be England's number 1. And as I said, the reason he's not the highest level is because, like Ramsdale as well and Dean Henderson, that he just makes one mistake maybe that another keeper wouldn't, and that is just the reason. But some of his performance for Everton, his performance in the Merseyside derby was outstanding, and like I said, he was outstanding. He's been outstanding for them ever since he signed, really, and he's outlived that whole defence, because you look at the money they spent in, and they brought in Michael Keane for big money, Yeremina for big money, Dina, and all these kind of players, and he's been the one constant in that Everton side of being signed in and around that period. So he's it's been funny because he's been Everton, as I look at it, kind of three captains with Coleman, Pickford, and Cody, and a lot of the time this year when Coleman hasn't played, Pickford's been captain, and when Pickford hasn't, Cody has. So it's Everton's spine's a lot more secure there now, and he's part of it.
Yeah, last thing on his antics, like you remember the game in Anfield, he was winding up the crowd, and you made the point to me, in fairness, with Ramsdale, when we were at that game, Arsenal were 1-0 up, and the Everton fans weren't with Benitez at the time, or the team particularly, and he started winding the crowd up, and he got him going, and it's a different game with that atmosphere. So I think keepers like that, you big up, like Pickford does in fairness in Goodison Park, you big up the home crowd, but away from home, you can't do that. But look, that's the chat there Everton mentioned to Manchester United. Really looking